Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. Get ready for today's unnerving journey. The drive had been longer than expected. My plan was to make it through the night, but the long stretch of highway and my exhaustion weren't mixing well. When I saw the glowing sign for a roadside diner and gas station, I decided to stop. It was late, nearly midnight, and the parking lot was mostly empty except for a few semi-trucks and a beat-up sedan. The diner was still open though, with the neon 24 hours sign flickering in the window. I parked, stretched my legs, and stepped inside. The interior was typical for a roadside diner. Faded booths, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a tired-looking waitress leaning against the counter. She glanced up as I entered. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yeah, please," I said, sliding into a booth. She poured me a cup and went back to flipping through a magazine. As I sipped, I noticed a man sitting at the far end of the diner. He was alone, his face partially hidden by a baseball cap, his focus on a notebook he was scribbling in. I tried not to stare, but something about him felt off. After a few minutes, he got up, leaving a few bills on the counter. He walked out without a glance in my direction. I relaxed a little, chucking up my unease to exhaustion. That's when I noticed the notebook. He'd left it behind, resting on the booth where he'd been sitting. Curiosity got the better of me. I slid out of my booth and picked it up. The cover was plain, but when I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. Inside were detailed notes, license plates, descriptions of cars, and timestamps. My car was listed, along with the exact time I'd arrived. The door jingled as it opened, and I quickly shut the notebook. The man had returned, his expression unreadable. "That's mine," he said, his voice calm but firm. I handed it over, trying to act casual. "Sorry, didn't realize." He took it without a word and walked out again, this time heading toward the gas station. My gut told me to leave. I paid for my coffee and hurried back to my car, but as I approached, I noticed something strange. There was a small device attached to my rear bumper. It looked like a tracker. I glanced around, my pulse racing. The man was nowhere to be seen, but his car, a dark SUV, was parked near the gas station. I didn't think, I acted. I yanked the tracker off, climbed into my car, and sped out of the parking lot. About a mile down the road, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. The SUV was following me. I kept my speed steady, trying not to panic. The highway was deserted, and my options were limited. After a few minutes, the SUV sped up, pulling alongside me. The man rolled down his window, signaling for me to pull over. I ignored him, pressing harder on the gas. He swerved, trying to force me off the road. My heart pounded as I gripped the wheel, narrowly avoiding a ditch. Finally, I spotted a small police checkpoint up ahead. Orange cones and flashing lights. Relief washed over me. I slowed down, flashing my headlights to get the officer's attention as I pulled in. The SUV stopped abruptly in the distance, then reversed and sped off in the opposite direction. When I explained everything to the officers, they immediately took it seriously. One of them checked my car and confirmed there had been a tracking device. They called it in, issuing a lookout for the SUV. "We've had reports of suspicious activity at nearby pit stops," one officer said. "You might have been targeted for car theft, or worse. You're lucky you noticed the tracker when you did." I stayed at the checkpoint until I felt safe enough to continue my drive. The officers assured me they'd patrol the area more frequently, but I couldn't shake the memory of the man's expression when he saw me with his notebook. Calm, cold, and calculating. From then on, I made a rule for myself. No late-night pit stops, no exceptions. Some chances just aren't worth taking. Driving late at night always made me uneasy, but I had no choice. Work deadlines had pushed me late, and now I found myself on an empty highway with miles to go before the next town. The gas gauge blinked at me, a warning that I needed to stop soon. I spotted a small pit stop ahead, a dimly lit gas station with an old convenience store. I pulled in, relieved to see at least one other car parked outside. The attendant inside gave me a brief glance but didn't say much as I swiped my card at the pump. I was about to get back on the road when a figure appeared from the shadows. A young woman, mid-20s, waving frantically at me. "Please, can you help me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "My car broke down a few miles back. I just need a ride to the next town." Every instinct told me not to get involved, but her desperate expression gave me pause. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the passenger door. "Thanks so much," she said, climbing in. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." She was polite at first, but as we drove, her demeanor shifted. She started asking strange questions. "Are you driving alone tonight? Does anyone know you're on this road? What do you do for work?" I kept my answers short, trying to focus on the road. My gut churned with unease. When we reached a stretch of road with no lights, she suddenly leaned forward, pointing out the window. "Stop here," she said. "What? There's nothing here," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "I said stop here," she demanded, her tone cold and commanding. My heart pounded as I slowed the car, but instead of stopping completely, I pressed the accelerator and sped up. "What are you doing?" she yelled, grabbing for the wheel. I swerved, narrowly avoiding a ditch. "Get out of my car," I shouted. Her demeanor shifted again, calm, almost eerily so. "You should have listened," she said quietly. A sudden movement on the side of the road caught my eye. Another figure emerged from the darkness, waving something metallic, like a crowbar. I floored it, steering around the figure and accelerating down the highway. The woman in the passenger seat tried to open the door but couldn't. I glanced back just long enough to see the figure chasing after us but falling behind. When I finally spotted the lights of a small diner ahead, I pulled in sharply, leaving the car running. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling. She smiled, opened the door, and stepped out as if nothing had happened. Without a word, she disappeared into the night. Shaken, I called the police and reported the incident. They took my statement, but didn't seem surprised. "Sounds like you ran into one of those roadside setups," the officer said. "People pretend to need help, lure you to a quiet spot, and then you're outnumbered. You're lucky you trusted your instincts." Lucky wasn't the word I'd use. From that night on, I swore I'd never pick up a hitchhiker again. I was driving back home after visiting some old friends, my car loaded with my gear for the weekend. The road was long, the kind that seemed endless after dark. I had crossed a few miles without seeing much when the fuel light blinked on, warning me that I'd be running on fumes soon. I spotted a lonely pit stop up ahead. It looked like the kind of place people only stop at when they have no other choice. The lights were dim and the gas station seemed outdated. Still, I pulled in, hoping I could make it through the last stretch of the journey. I parked by the pumps and grabbed my wallet, preparing for a quick stop. A small bell rang as I entered the convenience store. The cashier, a middle-aged man, gave me a brief nod before returning to his phone. The place was quiet. Almost too quiet. I grabbed a bottle of water and headed to the counter to pay. "Anything else I can get you?" the cashier asked in a monotone voice. "No, just the water, thanks," I said, glancing around at the empty shelves. I'd been on the road for hours and couldn't help but feel a little off. The isolation of the place was unsettling, and the hum of the fluorescent lights above didn't help. But I shrugged it off, figuring I was just tired from the drive. As I paid, the door opened and a man walked in. His clothes were worn. Work boots, a faded jacket, and his eyes darted around nervously, as if he was looking for something. He walked past the counter, heading straight for the bathroom in the back. I barely noticed it at first, but something about the way he moved seemed odd. I paid it no mind, grabbed my change and walked out to my car. I was filling up my tank when I heard the faint sound of footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting to see the man walking out of the store, but instead, I was face to face with another stranger, an older man with a thick beard, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, even though it was past midnight. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'm stuck on the side of the road up ahead. Could you help me out?" I took a step back, my instinct telling me something wasn't right. "I'm sorry, I don't think I can help," I replied, trying to sound polite but firm. The man didn't move, his eyes locked on mine. He took a step closer. "I just need a ride to the next town. My phone's dead and I can't get any reception here." I looked over at my car, the empty parking lot, and then back at him. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There was something about his demeanor that didn't sit well with me. "I really can't help you," I said, my voice growing firmer. "You should go inside and call for a tow truck." He hesitated, but then he smiled. I didn't mean to trouble you. I'll just wait here for a bit." I finished pumping my gas quickly, keeping my eyes on him. When I turned to get into my car, I noticed the first man from the store was now standing near the door, watching me intently. My stomach dropped. Both of them were here now, and it felt like they were sizing me up. I quickly got into my car, locking the doors as I did. I started the engine, keeping my eyes on the two men. The older one was still standing by the pump, and the older man, had stepped out from the store, taking slow steps toward me. My heart raced as I reversed out of the parking space, not looking back until I was far enough down the road. I floored it, not caring if I ran the red light at the next intersection. I sped straight down the street, back toward the intersection. Al-Mami's heart started beating faster. I never stopped at that pit stop again. The next day, I learned that a robbery had occurred at that very same gas station just days before, involving two men fitting the descriptions of the ones I encountered. My gut had been right. Something wasn't right that night. After that experience, I made a mental note to trust my instincts, even when it seemed like nothing was wrong. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.